Political violence is already ramping up in Malawi. This is 7 months before the general elections as an MCP vehicle gets destroyed in Machinga at the weekend, which I think is an indicator of things to come as we get closer to the general elections on September 16th. And the next story is that the early election campaign sends CCAP Blantyre Synod into a crisis as it disowns its reverends who went to see the former president of Malawi, Peter Mutharika, in Mangochi, also the president of the DPP. So do not forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment to this channel. It helps us reach a wider audience. And we are on the road to 10,000 subscribers and we are working hard on it. Footage of young Malawians destroying a vehicle belonging to the Malawi Congress Party has emerged while the occupants of the vehicle went into hiding, fearing for their lives. What is concerning from this scenario is that at times Malawi feels as if it just needs someone to light a match to ignite. The current economic climate is not only bad for people's daily lives, but it might be dangerous. Malawians are doing it very tough at the moment with lack of food, very high cost of commodities, and just generally the deteriorating standards of living, among other issues. I don't think as a country we have ever gone into a general election with a similar economic situation. I did mention that the political violence seems to have started early, as a few months ago there were equally distressing scenes in Lilongwe when the DPP members were beaten up and harassed and their vehicles destroyed, presumably by MCP political cadres. There have been such incidences in other areas as well. Normally this pattern of violence is seen when the campaign is heating up and we are closer to the elections date, when the emotions are very, very high at the time. But for me, this is just a little fraction of what is to come in the coming months. We should expect an early spike in electoral violence than in previous elections. As you can see from the videos, it is the young people who are the main perpetrators, and they are getting younger and younger, which is scary. For most democracies in Africa, the period leading up to and after elections are dangerous. We have examples with our neighboring country of Mozambique. We saw weeks and weeks of post-electoral violence where scores of people were killed and property destroyed. We have seen similar situations in Kenya, which at times has suffered from some of the worst post-electoral violence imaginable. So I hope law enforcement, particularly the Malawi police, have plans in place to mitigate this tricky period. Unfortunately, the Malawi police does not really fill you with confidence in any way, isn't it? There is a huge sample size to refer to in the past where the police simply just don't turn up, or they're overwhelmed because of lack of resources, and that's very common. Or they just stand there and watch, especially if the perpetrators are from the ruling government. This election, as I've already said, is especially concerning with the current economic climate. People are hungry, they have no jobs, they have no prospects, price of commodities are skyrocketing, an exploding young population and a tense general election might be a recipe for disaster if we are not careful. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we don't see too much violence leading up to the elections, hopefully. Our next story is with the CCAP Blantyre Synod. Is the Synod already in a crisis as the church disowns the reverends who went to visit the previous president of Malawi, Dr. Arthur Mutharika, who is also the president of the opposition DPP, at his residence in Mangochi, the Page House. Now, the CCAP Blantyre Synod came out strongly to disassociate themselves with those reverends who attended the Page House. The Synod has made a statement which condemned the actions of its reverends, stating that they did not follow procedures and they went to the former president's house on their own accord. The Synod said they did not in any way sanction that move. They maintain in their statement that Blantyre Synod's stance on politics is non-partisan. No one believes that though. I have a lot of issues with this. First, it shows that a powerful and influential religious institution such as the CCAP Blantyre Synod has no control over its own reverends, who are employed by the church. As we have seen, those reverends said they were representing the CCAP Blantyre Synod. That was the implications, at least at the function. So then, it's not wrong to suggest that there might be a high level of indiscipline at the synod if this is the case. We then have to ask the question, is the current Blantyre Synod leadership weak, that its own reverends don't respect them at all? How will the leadership at the Blantyre Synod lead its flock if they can't control their own reverends? These are questions that we need to ask. The statement in itself by the Blantyre Synod is weak. It does not take any responsibility or mention any disciplinary measures that the synod will take up with its rogue reverends. The statement is soft and tolerant, which means that there will be no consequences for their actions. Well then, little wonder that the reverends are free to do whatever they like. Any established institution has policies in place which deal with those who breach the rules. A church institution such as the CCAP Blantyre Synod should be the pace setters for their community to follow. Because it's best not to say anything if you're not going to do anything about it, isn't it? Mind you, the church did not even apologize to President Mutharika. They should have, because they wasted his time. He hosted them, the reverends, under the banner of Blantyre Synod, only to be told that he was basically scammed. I am sure the former President Mutharika does not want to be involved in Blantyre Synod dramas. Obviously, the church's leadership lack accountability. You know what? Ideally, the latter should have had the following themes. First of all, they should have apologized to the former president, as I said. Secondly, they should have accepted that the reverends are part and parcel of the synod. You can't disown them. They are your reverends. Thirdly, the synod should have accepted the responsibility and failure on their part and then tell the public what they're going to do, decisively dealing with the rogue reverends, whether it's a suspension or something like that. That kind of transparency will at least ensure that members of the church have some confidence in their leadership, that someone is actually in charge, or that people do not have a certain narrative against the church. Because no one believes that the synod maintains a non-partisan stance. History has shown otherwise, and they say the proof is in the pudding. We will see in the coming months how apolitical the church is actually, if they mean what they're saying. It's not a stretch to say that the churches resemble political gatherings at times towards the election period. In the past, if my memory serves me right, I stand to be corrected on this one, the same synod actually endorsed a presidential candidate. There was that sort of thing a few years back. So what may follow next will be the Nkoma Synod, maybe then visiting the president in Lilongwe. Because we know how this game goes. We have seen it all before. As a matter of opinion, I think churches in Malawi tend to be way too political. I believe there is time and place for church's intervention. It made sense, for instance, when the bishops produced a pastoral letter which spoke against the one-party regime in the early 90s. That triggered change. Maybe once or twice after that, those pastoral letters made sense. But recently, these letters have become so frequent that they have largely lost their relevance because we get them so often as the church is entrenched in politics. Now, those pastoral letters have lost their magic. It can be both from the CCAP, from the Roman Catholics. They have been weaponized against political governments, and people stop paying attention. People go to church to primarily connect with their God. People are naturally too political on a normal day, and it gets worse, as I said, during the elections. Part of the reason why people flock to the church on Sundays or Saturdays is to feed their spirituality, to get away from politics, a safe sanctuary where people look at each other as worshippers, as one community, They do things together for the church because that is their safe place. Unfortunately, what this Blantyre Synod saga indicates that for the majority of Malawians, there will be no such luck. Malawians will be bombarded with political ideology every week, including Friday if you go to the mosque, Saturdays if you are a Seventh-day Adventist, and Sunday mornings at other places of worship, which is not ideal. We know how this movie goes. Anyway, leave your comment below and do not forget to subscribe. I will see you in my next video.